This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Charlene Aaron. Another day of protests at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad after protesters broke into the compound Tuesday. Hundreds of members of a militia backed by Iran, along with other protesters, gathered outside the embassy today. U.S. troops bracing for more chaos outside the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Marines fired tear gas to disperse pro-Iran protesters who surrounded the embassy's compound for a second day. Defense Secretary Mark Esper announcing an infantry battalion of about 750 soldiers has been authorized to deploy to the Middle East after hundreds of protesters attempted to storm the embassy Tuesday, trashing a reception area and smashing windows in one of the worst attacks on a U.S. diplomatic mission in years. From his Mar-a-Lago resort, President Trump blamed Iran for Tuesday's attack and praised the U.S. military for responding quickly.
Well, I think it's been handled very well. The Marines came in. As soon as we saw there was a potential for problem, they got in, and there was no problem whatsoever.
The president adamant the incident would not be a repeat of the 2012 Benghazi attack in Libya that left 4 Americans dead.
As you know, this will not be a Benghazi. Benghazi should never have happened. This will never, ever be a Benghazi.
The protesters are raging against deadly U.S. weekend airstrikes that reportedly killed 25 members of an Iranian-backed militia. Those strikes in retaliation for an attack on an Iraqi army base that killed a U.S. contractor last Friday. Militias in Iraq, backed by Iran, have launched numerous rocket attacks on bases housing U.S. forces amid growing tensions in the region between the U.S. and Iran. By early evening last night, the protesters had retreated from the compound, but set up tents outside where they planned a sit-in. American Apache helicopters flying overhead, dropping flares as a warning to protesters. Many chanted "Death to America" and "Death to Israel." Meanwhile, according to a State Department spokesperson, there are currently no plans to evacuate the embassy. The congregation at the church in Texas where 2 people were shot and killed Sunday had repeatedly given food to the gunman, according to the pastor, but they had declined to give him money, and that made him angry. Jack Wilson, a member of the church's volunteer security team, shot and killed the gunman after he opened fire during the church service. Texas authorities and President Trump praised a new state law that lets licensed handgun holders carry a weapon in place of worship. CBN's Mark Martin spoke with the Texas lawmaker who 2 years ago sponsored the law a few months after it had gone into effect. Here's a look at that story.
Going to church is supposed to be safe, a literal sanctuary where people meet God and find peace in a troubled world. That tranquil image has taken a beating after several shootings, including the one in Charleston, South Carolina, at Mother Emanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in 2015. Where 9 people lost their lives during a Bible study.
These people I knew well. These are fine people. These are all fine people.
And the September shooting last year near Nashville, Tennessee, where a gunman took the life of 1 person and injured more than half a dozen. And even more recently at First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas. In November, a gunman walked among the pews, killing 26 people. Ranging in age from 18 months to 77 years old. The Texas-based church security organization known as Sheepdog Seminars reports a record number of 114 violent deaths happened on faith-based property nationwide in 2017. So how should churches protect themselves? The state of Texas recently passed a law that allows them to use volunteers as security guards. The law went into effect in September, a little more than 2 months before the Sutherland Springs tragedy. Texas State Representative Matt Rinaldi sponsored the law.
It's tragic that churches that are supposed to be our sanctuaries are now so dangerous. We need to have security teams, sometimes armed. But it's important we do. It's important we defend them. Churches are increasingly targets now in today's culture, unfortunately.
Rinaldi blames Texas lobbyists for a previous law.
The problem with Texas law was that we actually passed an occupational licensing law prohibiting churches from doing security functions unless they paid somebody who was licensed to do it. It was senseless, and I think a lot of churches in the state of Texas were actually violating the law unknowingly.
The new law repeals that requirement, and Rinaldi believes it could be allowed across the country unless the state has passed a law banning church volunteers from serving as security.
If you have a small church, especially that can't afford private security, you should be able to defend yourself.
Rinaldi tells CBN News that in addition to using volunteers as security, the law allows churches to set up active shooter plans, patrol their campuses, and train concealed handgun license holders. The Texas lawmaker adds the law does not require training for these volunteers.
But it's smart to do so. Actually, what this law allows the churches to do is to coordinate training for these individuals where it was previously prohibited. So we're allowing them to be trained by passing this law, which is very important.
But not everyone believes Rinaldi's law is the best way to fortify a church. The associate pastor here at Wilshire Baptist Church in Dallas has reservations about the new legislation.
Maybe there are some churches that are better equipped to have access to trained lay security than other places. And that would be a different factor. But there's no training required. There's no level of skill required. My understanding, the way the law is written now, anyone can be that.
News reports sparked controversy, pointing out that the law did not require church volunteers to undergo the licensing, training, and background checks required of professional security officers. Critics expressed concern inexperienced volunteers would suddenly face life-threatening situations.
But the reality is most people who have a concealed carry license in the state of Texas have never shot their weapon, certainly in a defensive mode. So they have no experience on that. So that's very different than having an off-duty police officer or someone who's ex-military or ex-police or has been someone with some other level of training.
Wingfield helps pastor a large church with professional security guards. He tells CBN News that some volunteers also provide some security and admits there is some good to the new law.
I think in some cases it would work. And I'm not going to say it would never work. I would hope that all churches would be discerning about how they do that. There's some people who are very wise and experienced gun owners and users, and there's some people who are novices.
State Representative Rinaldi says some is better than none.
I would say it's better to have individuals providing security than not, especially in an armed situation. It didn't change the laws on who could enter a church with a handgun. What it did was change the law on how the church can train these individuals so they could do it more safely.
He now advises congregations to take that next step.
The law's in place. I would encourage churches to take note of it and to come up with a plan on how to deal with these situations. Sutherland Springs was a tragedy. We're still healing as a state, and we'll be healing for some time now.
Mark Martin, CBN News, Dallas.
Coming up, 2020 will likely see more religious liberty battles. How one defender is standing firm in biblical beliefs.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Public prayer, right to life, traditional marriage, more and more these views are deemed hateful and bigoted. A small minority is leading the charge against biblical beliefs. Who's fighting back? Paul Strand introduces us to one defender of religious liberty and tells us why they see reasons for hope.
As one who argues cases up here puts it, the heart of religious liberty is this: every human has a conscience, and government shouldn't be messing with it.
It's that inner voice that urges us to choose the good and reject evil.
Luke Goodrich has fought for this right before the U.S. Supreme Court and writes about the huge challenges to it in Free to Believe.
When the government comes in and forces us to violate our conscience, it's forcing us to go against our human nature and violating a fundamental human right.
But as America moves toward a post-Christian era, issues seen by believers in their conscience as wrong are now exalted. Therefore, any opposition to them is condemned as rank discrimination.
Now those long-standing Christian beliefs are actually viewed as a threat.
The biggest current battleground, homosexual and transgender rights.
The rapid advance of gay rights is certainly the most significant religious liberty threat today.
The government long ago said you can't discriminate based on someone's race or sex. If the Supreme Court rules sex includes sexual orientation or transgender status in upcoming cases, it could mean real trouble for those with biblical views on human sexuality. You could likely multiply by the thousands new problems of the kind suffered by baker Jack Phillips, who refused to make a cake celebrating gay marriage.
Thousands of religious organizations will face new lawsuits and new liability simply for acting on their long-standing beliefs about human sexuality.
At one point, supporters promised same-sex marriage wouldn't harm anyone. Well, depending on how the court rules, Goodrich points out how those same so-called peacemakers could go all out to get their opponents.
To brand traditional Christian beliefs about marriage as a form of bigotry and then use the power of the state to punish those religious beliefs and practices.
On the other hand, Frank Wright of D. James Kennedy Ministries maintains believers back only one-man, one-woman marriage because it's healthy for families.
The Bible says it because it's for our welfare. It's what enables families to flourish.
He's sad homosexuals and their allies view that approach as bigotry and hatred.
If they were to come to me and say, you know, why do you hate me? I would explain to them that I don't. You and I see this issue totally differently. I don't hate you. Why should I hate you? And why should you hate me because we disagree?
As for the transgender issue, the Obama administration mandated that doctors and hospitals provide surgery for men who wanted to be turned into women and women into men.
Even when it violated their religious beliefs and their medical judgment. And if they didn't do that, they would be deemed to be discriminating and would be subject to government penalties.
Abortion is another battleground where supporters try to demonize those who can't and won't back it.
If you as a Christian, whether you're a doctor or an employer, if you oppose abortion, you're somehow denying health care to women and discriminating against women.
Goodrich fought for both the Little Sisters of the Poor and Hobby Lobby's pro-life stand before the Supreme Court.
The government was trying to force them to provide abortion-causing drugs in their health insurance plans or in their businesses, even when their conscience told them, you cannot participate in an abortion.
The court ruled in favor of both, and Goodrich says believers can take hope in how often their conscience rights win like that in court.
We have a 90% win rate, and we're undefeated at the U.S. Supreme Court.
He warns, however, Christians need to prepare for defeats and learn how to show Christ's love even to a culture that's turning more and more against them.
Much of Scripture is written to Christians who are facing suffering and persecution for their faith. And as Christians, we need to recall those teachings and let those influence us. And it's not just about winning or fighting a culture war. It's actually more about being like Christ in the midst of these conflicts.
What Goodrich hopes for is a government that just leaves religion alone as much as possible. For instance, in public schools, it shouldn't force students to pray, but it can allow a time where they can pray if they want. It shouldn't build a cross on government property, but it can let one stand. In other words, government shouldn't oppose or promote religion. It should just let it be. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from the Supreme Court.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
And ministering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Patricia King is a respected apostolic and prophetic minister of the gospel. For over 30 years, she has inspired and equipped believers to walk in their God-given callings. Wendy Griffith and I recently spoke with her on how she's encouraged thousands to see their potential in Christ and what she sees for 2020.
Patricia, welcome to Prayer Link.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be with you.
It's an honor to have you. Well, yes. We are, of course, closing out 2019. What are some of the biggest takeaways from this past year as we head into 2020?
Well, 2019 has been a year that is preparing us for what's ahead. In fact, you know, as we see even some of the great evangelists in this last year or so going on to be with the Lord, there's seed in the ground that is going to bring forth a new breed of evangelists in this coming decade. And so I'm very, very excited about it. And especially like when we look at men of God like Reinhard Bonnke, like Billy Graham, who were known not only for their soul winning, because millions came into the kingdom as a result of them being faithful to God, but also they raised a standard of integrity of character. And both of them are known for their character. And I believe that as we're going into 2020, this is going to be one of the things that God is going to call for in His church to bring into alignment.
Man, and as you're talking about 2020, Patricia, what has God been showing you about the new year?
There's a huge transition that you can feel happening because God is going to align us for one of the greatest moves that we've ever seen in church history that is going to bring in a tremendous harvest worldwide. But in order for the fullness of the move of His glory and the manifestation of His kingdom and His government to come into the earth, He's calling for a new level of alignment. It was just the other day in a prayer meeting, I actually saw a vision of a sword coming down out of heaven into the earth. It was a two-edged sword. And the Lord said, this is a plumb line that I am laying into the earth, and it is the sword of truth. And I noticed that on one side was kindness, and the other side was the severity of God. So it's, you know, out of Romans 11:22. And this is a season when God is going to be exposing, sifting, and analyzing things in our heart to bring alignment to His purposes so that He can reveal greater glory and manifest greater glory. And one of the scriptures has been highlighted, I believe, for 2020 is out of Luke 12, starting in verse 2. It says, everything hidden and covered up will soon be exposed, for the facade is falling down and nothing will be kept secret for long. And the reason He is bringing exposure is because because he is good, because he wants to bring light. He wants to expel the darkness and bring the light. So we are not to be, trusting in the arm of flesh, but to trust in God and to lean on him, because it's all going to work together for good. It's just an aspect of his love coming into manifestation in this way.
Amen. That's powerful. Amen. Well, Patricia, a lot of people may need to be encouraged about the new year. They've had maybe a bad year, a bad decade. How would you encourage them to prepare for the 2020, for the new year?
No matter how hard the last year was, God has a victory. Every single time he has a victory, and that victory is in him, and it's in the promise in his word. And if you're in a battle right now, it's not over until you win, because God has promised you the win. So he's going to walk with you through into a place of glorious victory. And you will discover that in any area that's been difficult for you in the past, that you're going to find the treasures of that darkness, of that hard place. And you're going to be so grateful in these coming days, even for what seems like devastation right now, because God's going to work it together for good. He always does. He always will, because he loves you. Every devastating thing will have treasures inside of it that will work together for good for you.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5 Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Well, resolving to live healthier in the new year is a great decision. Our medical reporter Lori Johnson has the top 10 healthy habits for the new year.
The #1 healthy habit for the new year is exercise because of the short-term and long-term benefits. If you'd like to be among the 40% of regular exercisers, psychologists say focus on the first 3 weeks knowing it'll get easier, because studies have shown that any activity repeated daily becomes a habit after 3 weeks. #2, eat a healthy breakfast with protein within 90 minutes after you wake up. It triggers metabolism and keeps you from getting too hungry and overeating later in the day. #3, eat 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. 1 serving equals a half cup of cooked vegetables or a full cup of raw or leafy vegetables or a small whole fruit. #4, avoid trans fats. They're found in mostly processed foods, so if the list of ingredients includes hydrogenated, stay away. Ironically, trans fats prolong a food's shelf life, but it has the opposite effect on our bodies, according to Dr. Michael Aziz, author of The Perfect 10 Diet.
Trans fats are really like plastic, and when we eat them, they incorporate in our cells
and the cells cannot communicate or talk to one another. In turn, hormones are disturbed. Weight gain follows, but more troubling, the risk for heart disease, cancer, stroke, infertility goes up.
Number 5, eat the good fats, namely omega-3s found in foods like fish, especially salmon, sardines, and fish oil supplements. Other choices include walnuts, almonds, and flaxseed. They've been shown to reduce the risk of heart disease, improve your immunity, and reduce inflammation. Number 6, and one of the toughest, avoid sugar. Its negative laundry list runs from obesity to diabetes to heart disease and cancer. The average American consumes 135 pounds of sugar a year, compared to only 5 pounds 120 years ago. This includes hidden sugars like corn syrup, sucrose, glucose, and lactose. Celebrity diet coach Joy Bauer, author of the 90-10 weight loss plan, says start by going cold turkey.
The first 7 days, I completely eliminate all sugars, both real sugars and artificial sweeteners, because when you remove the taste of sweet from your mind and your taste buds, eventually it gets much easier and you stop craving it. And so many people, when they start week 2 and they're allowed to start adding some of these sugars back into their plan, they don't even want them because they feel great without it.
Good health is more than just diet and exercise. For example, did you know that the best way to avoid getting sick is to keep your hands clean? When using hand sanitizer, make sure it's at least 60% alcohol. Get in all those nooks and crannies and rub your hands until they're dry. When using soap and water, lather up for a full 20 seconds. Number 8, practice good dental hygiene. Believe it or not, periodontal infection contributes to heart disease, diabetes, and even premature underweight births. Number 9, get regular screenings depending on your age and gender. Some of the most important ones are an annual physical, blood pressure and cholesterol checks, colonoscopy, mammogram, pap test, prostate, and skin cancer screenings. And last but not least, get enough sleep. According to Dr. James Moss, author of Sleep for Success, if you don't get your Z's, you're setting yourself up for a whole host of health problems.
You're going to be irritable, anxious, depressed. You're going to gain weight. You have a greater risk for hypertension, that's heart attacks and strokes, type 2 diabetes, obesity, skin problems, and cancer. And your cognitive performance slows down. You can't think, you can't remember, you're not creative, you can't think critically. It affects how long you're going to live. And if you're an athlete, it just ruins your motor coordination and your reaction time.
So at a time when many of us vow to start afresh, take note of these healthy habits to make this new year your healthiest one yet. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
All great tips, and that's it for this edition of CBN News Watch. We hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day and Happy New Year.